At the network layer, the next layer down, the network layer is responsible for routing the information on the network. And the network layer uses logical addressing. Logical addressing in the TCP/IP environment is IP. It's the IP address. That is a logical address, and we'll talk more about that, a lot more about that later on. IPX is also a logical address. And also at the network layer are the routing protocols, RIP and IGRP, BGP, Border Gateway Protocol, OSPF, Open Shortest Path First. All of those we're going to be talking about more, and they are also at the network layer. So the network layer is responsible for understanding logical addresses. We talked about the fact that the session layer holds everything together, sets up the session, keeps the session together, and then terminates the session when it's over. And we talked about the fact that the session layer sets up the session once it finds out where that session is supposed to be set up to. Well, the network layer is the layer that helps the session layer determine where to set up the session, where that logical address is. But one layer down, we've got the data link layer. The data link layer doesn't work with logical addresses. The data link layer actually works with a physical address. You may say, well, how do you have a physical address on a computer? Well, you actually have an address that is burned in to every network interface card, and we have physical addresses that we can assign to routers and switches. The physical addresses are called MAC addresses. And the MAC addresses should at least be unique on our own network, but MAC addresses on network interface cards are supposed to be unique within the entire world. So a MAC address on a network interface card is like a fingerprint. And the data link layer works with this physical addressing. So at the data link layer, we actually have two different sublayers. We've got the logical link control layer, which manages the communications between the data link layer and the network layer. And we have the media access control layer. The media access control layer is where the MAC address is. And the media access control layer controls the physical addressing and makes sure that each computer or each interface has a separate and distinct and unique physical address. Otherwise, the packets don't know where to go. We'll talk a lot more about that later on. And at the bottom of the model is the physical layer. The physical layer defines all the electrical and procedural and functional, all the different specifications that are at the actual physical link. So the bottom layer, the physical layer, defines the fact that a network interface card has to have a certain number of volts, has to run off of a certain number of volts, that the timing has to be a certain way. The way that the packets are put out onto the network has to be done in a certain way. Or actually, it's just bits that are put out onto the network at the physical layer. It's just offs and ons, but that timing has to be a certain way. The physical data rules and the physical data rates are defined at the physical layer. The number of twists that have to be in a category 5 cable, for example. All those things are defined at the physical layer. So the physical layer is the bottom layer of the OSI model.